The moment my son looked at me and said, "Mom, it's time you moved out," my whole world stopped. I stood there, staring at the boy I raised, the one I sacrificed everything for. And in that second, something inside me broke. But I didn't argue. I simply smiled, waited for him to leave for work, and did the one thing he never expected. I sold the house. And that single decision changed all our lives forever. I still remember the look on my son's face when he came back from work that evening. His eyes were wide, his mouth hanging open, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Our house was empty. The furniture gone. The curtains gone. Even the old clock that used to tick loudly in the hallway was no longer there. He dropped his briefcase on the floor and turned to me, his voice trembling. "Mom, what did you do?" I looked at him calmly, holding a cup of tea in my hand. "You said it's time I moved out," I said softly. "So I did what I had to do. I sold the house." The cup slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. But I wasn't a ghost. I was a mother who had finally found her voice. That was the day everything changed. But before I tell you what happened after that, let me take you back to how it all began. My name is Margaret, though everyone in the neighborhood calls me Grandma Maggie. I'm 72 years old, and I lived in that house for more than 40 years. My husband, Robert, built it with his own hands back when we were young and full of dreams. We raised our 2 sons there, Daniel and Michael. After Robert died, the house became my world. Every room carried a memory. The kitchen still smelled of his favorite soup. The garden still had the roses he planted for me on our anniversary. It wasn't just a house, it was a piece of my heart. Daniel, my eldest, moved to another city years ago. He rarely called. But Michael, my youngest, promised me he'd always take care of me. For years he did. He stayed with me, helped with chores, and made sure I never felt alone. But things started to change when he got a new job and began dating a woman named Lisa. Lisa was young, smart, and beautiful. But she never liked me much. At first, I thought it was just jealousy or discomfort. Maybe she wasn't used to living with an old woman. I tried my best to be kind to her. I'd make her tea, compliment her dresses, even give her space when she visited. But soon, I began to notice how she looked around the house whenever she came. Her eyes wandered. Not with curiosity, but calculation. One evening, I overheard her whispering to Michael in the living room when she thought I was asleep. "She's old, Mike," Lisa said. "This house is too big for her. We could sell it and buy something nicer for ourselves. You deserve better." My heart froze. Michael didn't answer at first. Then he said quietly, "She loves this house. It's all she has." Lisa sighed. "And what about us? Are we supposed to live with your mom forever?" That night, I cried silently in my bed. I had never wanted to be a burden. I only wanted love and peace in my final years. The following months were hard. Michael began spending more time at Lisa's apartment. He came home late. Sometimes not at all. When he was home, he was distant, cold even. The warmth in his eyes had faded. Then one morning it happened. I was sitting in the living room, knitting, when he walked in wearing a serious expression. He didn't even sit down. "Mom," he said, "I've been thinking. Maybe it's time you moved out. You could stay somewhere smaller. Maybe one of those senior homes. This house is too much for you." For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard him right. "Moved out?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Michael, this is our home." He sighed. "I know, Mom. But it's old, and it needs a lot of work. You're not young anymore. I can't take care of everything." I stared at him, searching his face for a hint of guilt or kindness. There was none. He had already made up his mind. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like a goodbye. Every shadow on the wall reminded me of the man who built it with love. I whispered to the darkness, "Robert, if you were here, what would you do?" And then something inside me shifted. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Mr. Green, a kind man who'd helped Robert and me with our will years ago. I told him I wanted to sell the house. He was surprised. "Are you sure, Mrs. Taylor? You've lived there your whole life." "Yes," I said firmly. "But this time, I'm doing it on my terms." For the next few days, I moved quietly. I packed my belongings while Michael was at work. I contacted a real estate agent, and within a week, I had a buyer. A young couple who dreamed of starting their family in a warm, loving home. I saw myself and Robert in them. When the papers were ready, I signed them without hesitation. The money was transferred to my account the same day. I felt lighter, free even. That evening, when Michael came home, he didn't notice anything strange at first. He went to his room, then stopped suddenly. "Mom," he called out. "Where's my TV? And where's the couch?" I walked into the hallway, holding the envelope with the sale papers. "I sold it," I said. He laughed, thinking I was joking. But when he saw the empty walls and the echo in the rooms, his smile disappeared. "You did what?" he shouted. "I sold the house," I repeated calmly. "You said it was time I moved out. So I made sure we both did." His face turned pale. He stepped closer, his voice trembling with anger. "You can't just sell the house without telling me. What were you thinking?" I looked at him with tears in my eyes. "I was thinking that this house belonged to your father and me. You wanted me gone, so I left, but I took the memories with me." He stood frozen, unable to speak. Then he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I sat down on the porch, watching the sunset over the empty yard. A part of me hurt deeply, but another part of me felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. But peace never lasts long when pride is wounded. Because the next morning, I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, Michael was there again, but this time he wasn't alone. Lisa stood beside him, her face cold and unreadable. And the words she said next made my heart drop. Lisa stood at the door with her arms folded across her chest. Her lips curved into a faint, sharp smile that didn't reach her eyes. Michael stood slightly behind her, his face pale and stiff. I could see the storm brewing between them, and somehow I knew. This wasn't going to be a simple conversation. "Good morning," I said quietly, even though my heart was pounding. "Would you both like to come in?" Lisa didn't wait for an answer. She brushed past me into the hallway, her heels clicking loudly on the wooden floor. She looked around the empty living room with raised eyebrows. "So it's true," she said. "You really sold it." Michael closed the door and rubbed his forehead. "Mom," I tried to tell her not to come, but Lisa cut him off. "Don't defend her, Michael. She's lost her mind." Her words cut through me like a knife. "Watch your tongue, young lady," I said softly but firmly. "You're standing in a house that once held generations of my family's love." Lisa laughed, a short, cruel laugh. "Correction. It used to hold that love. Now it's gone because you sold it behind our backs." Michael turned to me. His voice was trembling but quieter this time. "Mom, why didn't you tell me? You could have just talked to me before making such a big decision." I stared at him, my eyes welling up with tears. "You told me it was time I moved out, Michael. I didn't want to argue. I simply listened to you." He fell silent. Lisa rolled her eyes and crossed her arms again. "You know what I think? I think she did it out of spite," she said. "You embarrassed her, so she wanted to punish you." I looked at her, then at my son. "No, Vir. I did it out of pain, the kind only a mother can feel when her child forgets her worth." There was silence. The wind blew softly through the open window, stirring the dust where our family photos once hung. Finally, Michael spoke again. "So where are you going to live now, Mom?" I smiled faintly. "I already found a place. It's small, quiet, and peaceful. I'll be fine." Lisa's eyebrows lifted. "You already found a place? How long have you been planning this?" I didn't answer. I just walked to the kitchen counter and picked up an envelope. Inside were the sale papers and a note I had written for Michael. I handed it to him. "This is for you," I said. "It explains everything." He took it, but before he could open it, Lisa snatched it from his hand and tore it open. She read the note out loud. "My dear Michael, you once told me it was time for me to move out. So I did, and I made sure you'd have nothing left to fight over when I was gone. The money from the house is already in a trust for your future children. You won't touch it until you learn what family truly means. Mom." Lisa's face turned red with anger. "You put the money in a trust? Are you insane? That money could have bought us a new house." "Lisa," I said softly, You have hands. You can build your own. Michael looked torn between anger and guilt. Mom, you didn't have to do this. I met his eyes. Yes, I did. I wanted to make sure no one could use my love for this house to hurt me again. He opened his mouth to speak, but Lisa grabbed his arm. Let's go, Michael. There's no point arguing with her. He hesitated, staring at me one last time before turning to leave. I could see the conflict in his eyes, pride fighting against regret. As they walked away, Lisa muttered something under her breath. Stubborn old woman. She'll regret this. I watched them drive off, the car's tires kicking up dust on the gravel road. When the silence returned, I sat down slowly in the empty living room. My hands trembled as I looked around one last time. The echoes of laughter, birthdays, and memories still lingered in the air. I whispered to myself, goodbye home. A few hours later, I packed the last of my bags and called a taxi. My new home wasn't far. A small cottage on the edge of town, surrounded by trees and peace. The air there was cleaner, the noise of the city distant. The cottage had 2 small rooms, a kitchen that smelled of pine wood, and a tiny porch with a rocking chair. When I first walked in, I felt a deep calm in my chest. It wasn't as grand as my old house, but it was mine. Truly mine. As I unpacked, I found an old photo frame of Robert holding baby Michael. I placed it by the window and smiled. You'd be proud of me, dear, I whispered. I finally stood up for myself. That night, for the first time in many years, I slept peacefully. But peace never lasts forever. The next morning, there was a loud knock on my door. I opened it to find Daniel, my elder son, standing there. He looked angry, angrier than I had ever seen him. What have you done, Mom? He said sharply. Michael called me last night. You sold the house without telling anyone. I felt my stomach twist. Daniel, He stepped inside, his voice rising. That house belonged to Dad. How could you just sell it like that? Do you know what you've started? I looked at him confused. Started? What do you mean? Daniel ran a hand through his hair. You don't understand, Mom. Michael's in trouble. Serious trouble. And now that money you put in the trust, it's the only thing that could have saved him. My heart skipped a beat. Trouble? What kind of trouble? He hesitated, then looked at me with a heavy sigh. He owes people money. Dangerous people. And now they're coming here. Before I could say another word, we heard a car screech to a stop outside. The sound of footsteps followed, heavy, fast, angry. Daniel's eyes widened. They're here, Mom. The sound of car doors slamming outside made my heart jump. Daniel's words still rang in my ears. They're here, Mom. My hands trembled as I stepped toward the window. Through the thin curtains, I saw 2 men walking toward the cottage. They were big, rough-looking, and dressed in dark clothes. One had tattoos crawling up his neck. The other wore dark glasses even though the sun was barely up. Daniel grabbed my arm gently. Mom, go inside the kitchen. Don't say a word no matter what happens. Daniel, I whispered. Who are they? What do they want from Michael? He swallowed hard. Money. A lot of it. He borrowed from the wrong people, Mom. Before I could respond, there was a heavy knock on the door. Bam, bam, bam. It shook the whole cottage. Open up, a deep voice shouted. We know you're in there. Daniel took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. He walked to the door and opened it slightly. Please, there's no need to yell, he said carefully. This is my mother's house. The man in the dark glasses smirked. Oh, we know exactly whose house this is. Michael Taylor's mother, right? Daniel's jaw tightened. Michael doesn't live here anymore. The man's smirk faded. Yeah? Well, he owes us $20,000, and if we don't get it today, someone's gonna pay for it. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I stepped forward, my voice shaky but steady enough to be heard. He's my son, I said. But I don't have that kind of money. The tattooed man looked me up and down, his eyes cold. Maybe not now. But word is, you just sold your house. That means you do have money. Daniel turned to me, his face pale. Mom, don't say anything. But it was too late. The man had already stepped inside, brushing past Daniel. We're not here to hurt anyone, he said, though his tone didn't sound peaceful. We just need what's owed. I took a step back, clutching the edge of the table for support. The money from the house isn't mine anymore. It's in a trust. I can't touch it. The man with the glasses leaned closer. Then you better find a way to untrust it. Daniel moved between us. You're not threatening my mother. The tattooed man chuckled. Threat? Son, this isn't a threat. It's a promise. For a moment no one spoke. The ticking of the old wall clock filled the silence. Then I remembered something that made my heart race. When I sold the house, I had kept a small emergency envelope from the lawyer's office. It wasn't much, just a few $1,000s, but maybe it could calm them down. Wait, I said quickly. Give me a moment. I walked into the kitchen, pretending to look for the envelope. My mind was spinning. $22,000? How could Michael have gotten into something so dark? I finally found the envelope in a drawer and returned to the living room. My hands trembled as I held it out. It's all I have right now. Please take this and leave him alone. The man with the glasses snatched the envelope and counted the money. His face twisted with disappointment. 3,000, he scoffed. That's not even close. He stepped toward me. Daniel pushed him back. She's done nothing wrong. The tattooed man raised a hand, signaling his partner to calm down. All right, he said with a sneer. We'll give you some time. But if we don't have the rest by Friday, we'll come back. And next time, we won't be this polite. Then they left, slamming the door behind them so hard that a picture frame fell off the wall. Daniel rushed to me, placing his hands on my shoulders. Mom, are you okay? I nodded slowly, though my heart was pounding. I've fine. But Daniel, what has your brother done? He sighed deeply and sat down, burying his face in his hands. Mom, Michael's been struggling for a while. He lost money on some bad deals. He thought he could fix it with a loan. But those men, they're loan sharks. Once you owe them, you can't escape. I felt tears well in my eyes. He didn't tell me anything. Not even a word. He didn't want to worry you, Daniel said quietly. But now it's worse. I stood up, pacing across the small living room. We can't just wait for them to come back. They'll hurt him. Or worse. Daniel looked up. I'll talk to Michael. Maybe he can still fix this before it's too late. I shook my head. No, Daniel. This time, I'll talk to him myself. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me jump. I sat by the window, staring at the moonlight on the garden path. My thoughts drifted back to when Michael was a little boy, running around barefoot, laughing, holding a toy car Robert had made for him. Where had that innocent child gone? What had life done to him? By morning, I had made up my mind. I packed a small bag and took the bus to the city. It wasn't a long ride, but it felt endless. I hadn't been to Michael's apartment in months. When I finally arrived, the building looked worn and sad. A place where dreams came to die. I climbed the stairs and knocked on his door. There was no answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Michael, it's me. Open up. After a long pause, the door opened slightly. Michael stood there, unshaven, tired and pale. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Mom, he whispered, shocked. What are you doing here? I stepped inside. The apartment smelled of old food and worry. We need to talk, Michael, I said. About the money. About those men. He froze. They came to you? I nodded. They know about the house. They know about me. You've put us both in danger. Michael ran his hands through his hair, panicked. I didn't mean for this to happen. I thought I could pay them back before they found out. By lying to your own mother? I said softly. By risking your life? He sank onto the couch, tears filling his eyes. I didn't want you to know. I wanted to be someone you could be proud of. I sat beside him, my heart breaking. You're my son. I'll always love you. But pride means nothing if it costs your soul. He turned to me, his voice trembling. Mom, it's too late. They want the money by Friday or they'll, his voice broke. They said they'll make an example out of me. I held his hands tightly. Then we'll find a way. Together. Just as I said that, there was another knock on the door, sharp and loud. Michael froze. It's them, he whispered. The knock came again, harder this time. Bam, bam, bam. And then a voice low, cold, and angry said, "Open up, Michael. We need to talk." The knocking grew louder. Each thud against the door echoed through the tiny apartment like thunder. Michael's eyes darted around the room, panic spreading across his face. I could feel his hands trembling in mine. "Mom, go hide," he whispered urgently. "Please, go into the bedroom and lock the door." But I shook my head. "I'm not leaving you, Michael. Not again." The knocking stopped. For a brief moment, there was silence, a silence so heavy it pressed on my chest. Then came the voice again, low and sharp. "Last chance, Michael. Open the door, or we'll open it for you." Michael took a shaky breath and walked to the door. I followed him, staying behind. He slowly turned the knob. The door swung open, and the same two men from the cottage stepped inside. The tattooed one, and the man with the dark glasses. But this time they weren't alone. A third man entered with them, older, thinner, but with a coldness in his eyes that sent chills down my spine. He looked like the kind of man who never raised his voice, because he didn't need to. Well, the older man said, his tone almost polite. "So this is Michael Taylor." He glanced around the messy room. "Nice place you've got here. Very temporary." Michael's voice cracked. "Mr. Reed, please, I just need more time." Mr. Reed raised a hand to silence him. "Time is money, Michael. And you're out of both." The tattooed man smirked. He had time when he was making promises. Now it's payday. I stepped forward before they could move closer. "Please," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "He doesn't have your money, but I can help." The older man's eyes flicked to me. "Ah, the famous mother," he said with a faint smile. "You know, your son here told us he had family who could help. But I didn't think he meant you." Michael turned toward me in panic. "Mom, no, don't get involved." But it was too late. Mr. Reed took a step closer. "You sold your house, didn't you? That must have fetched a pretty sum. We don't need all of it. Just what's owed." "I can't," I said, forcing the words out. "The money is in a trust. It's not accessible." The room went silent. Then the man's smile disappeared. "Not accessible," he repeated softly. "That's unfortunate. Because when money isn't available," he turned to his men, "we find other ways to collect." The tattooed man stepped forward, his fists tightening. Michael moved in front of me. "Don't touch her," he shouted. But before anyone could move, the door to the apartment suddenly burst open again, and Daniel charged in. "Stop," he yelled, holding up his phone. "I called the police. They're on their way." The men froze. The one with the glasses cursed under his breath. Mr. Reed gave Daniel a long, cold look. "You shouldn't have done that, boy." Daniel didn't back down. "If you hurt anyone, you'll regret it." Mr. Reed adjusted his coat and nodded to his men. "Let's go. For now." He looked back at Michael. "You have 48 hours. If I don't have my money by then, you'll wish the police had been the ones knocking." And with that they left. The moment the door closed, I collapsed into a chair, my legs shaking. Michael sat on the floor, his face buried in his hands. Daniel locked the door and leaned against it, breathing heavily. "Are you both okay?" Daniel asked. I nodded weakly. "For now." Michael didn't speak. He looked broken, like a man watching his world crumble in slow motion. Hours passed. We sat in silence, afraid to speak too loudly, afraid to think about what would happen next. Finally, Michael looked up. "I can't do this anymore," he said softly. "They'll kill me, Mom. I messed everything up." I reached out, placing a trembling hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone, Michael. We'll fix this together." Daniel frowned. "Mom, you can't just." "I can and I will," I interrupted. "He's my son." But even as I said it, I didn't know how. The trust money couldn't be touched yet, not without court approval. And we only had 2 days. Then suddenly a thought struck me. "Wait," I said slowly. "Robert's old life insurance policy. I never closed the account after he died. Maybe." Daniel's eyes widened. "You still have that?" "Yes," I said. "It was meant for emergencies. And if this isn't one, I don't know what is." Michael looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "Mom, are you sure?" I smiled faintly. A mother's job is to protect her children, even from their own mistakes. We spent the rest of the day searching through my old boxes and papers. I found the document buried in an old envelope. Robert's policy, untouched for years. It wasn't enough to pay everything, but it was close. "I'll call the insurance office in the morning," I said. "We'll see what can be done." That night, we stayed together in the apartment. Michael barely spoke. I could see the guilt eating away at him. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to the sound of the door creaking. I turned my head and saw Michael slipping out quietly. "Michael," I whispered, but he didn't answer. I got up and followed him to the hallway. He was putting on his jacket, his face pale and tired. "Where are you going?" I asked. He turned to me slowly. "I can't let you do this, Mom. You've already lost so much because of me. I'm not dragging you down too." "Michael, no." I tried to grab his arm, but he stepped back. "I'll fix this. My way," he said. "Tell Daniel I'm sorry." Before I could stop him, he opened the door and ran down the stairs. I shouted after him, but my voice broke. Daniel came rushing out of the room. "What happened?" "He's gone," I said, tears running down my cheeks. "He's gone to face them alone." Daniel looked out the window and cursed. "Mom, we have to find him before they do." We grabbed our coats and rushed into the night. The streets were quiet, the cold air biting our faces. My heart raced as I prayed silently, "Please God, keep him safe." We followed the sound of distant footsteps echoing down the dark alley. And then from somewhere ahead, we heard a shout, followed by a crash. "Michael!" I screamed. Daniel grabbed my hand, and we ran toward the sound. The alley was dimly lit, but at the far end, we could see them. Michael, surrounded by the same three men. One of them grabbed him by the collar, shoving him against the wall. "Where's our money, Michael?" Mr. Reed's voice echoed. "You think running makes it go away?" Michael struggled, gasping. "Please. I'll get it. I just need." Mr. Reed raised his hand, and one of the men struck Michael across the face. He fell to the ground, blood trickling from his lip. "Stop!" I screamed, running toward them. "Please don't hurt him." But before I could reach them, one of the men turned toward me. And something in his hand glinted under the streetlight. It was a knife. The knife gleamed under the streetlight, and my heart nearly stopped. The man holding it stepped closer to Michael, his grin cold and cruel. "Back off, old lady," he said. "This doesn't concern you." But it did. Everything about this moment concerned me, because that was my son lying on the cold ground, bleeding and shaking, and no mother could stand by and watch that happen. "Please," I said, raising my hands. "You'll get your money. Just don't hurt him anymore." Mr. Reed watched me carefully, his expression calm but dangerous. "You've said that before," he said. "But words don't pay debts." Before I could speak again, Daniel stepped forward. "You want your money? Fine. But if you hurt our mother, I swear you'll regret it." The tattooed man laughed. "Regret? We are regret." The man with the knife moved closer to Michael. I didn't think. I just acted. I picked up a piece of broken wood from the ground and swung it at his arm. The knife flew out of his hand, clattering onto the pavement. "Mom!" Daniel shouted, rushing forward. The men turned toward me in shock, and that split second was all Daniel needed. He tackled the man with the glasses to the ground while Michael crawled toward the knife, kicking it away. But then Mr. Reed pulled something from his coat, a small gun. The metallic click echoed in the alley, freezing everyone. "Enough," he barked. "You people don't understand how the world works. There's always a price for defiance." He pointed the gun at Michael. "And it's time your son paid his." I stepped in front of Michael without thinking. "If you shoot him," I said quietly, "you'll have to go through me first." Mr. Reed tilted his head slightly, studying me. For a long, tense moment he didn't move. Then slowly, a strange smile crept onto his face. "You've got courage, old woman," he said. "Reminds me of my mother." He lowered the gun just a little, but not enough to make me breathe easy. "You've got 24 hours, he said finally. "One day. If I don't get my money, next time I won't be so patient." Then he turned and walked away, his men following him silently. The sound of their footsteps faded into the night, leaving only the trembling breaths of my sons and the pounding of my heart. Michael collapsed to the ground, holding his face in his hands. Mom, I'm so sorry, he whispered. I never wanted this. I knelt beside him, brushing his hair away from his bruised forehead. You made mistakes, I said softly. But I won't lose you over them. Daniel helped him stand, his voice trembling with anger. They're not bluffing, Mom. They'll come back. I know, I said. That's why we can't wait for morning. We have to act now. We went back to my cottage that night, exhausted and afraid. I could barely keep my hands from shaking as I pulled out Robert's old insurance file again. Tomorrow, I said. We'll go to the office. I'll cash out the policy. It's the only way. Daniel looked at me, his eyes full of worry. Mom, if you do that, you'll lose everything. I smiled faintly. I've already lost everything that mattered, except the two of you. Morning came slowly. The air outside was still and gray. I dressed quietly, feeling older than I ever had before. My reflection in the mirror looked tired, but my heart felt steady. Michael insisted on coming with me. We drove in silence to the insurance office downtown. I explained the situation to the manager, an older man with kind eyes. After some hesitation and a few phone calls, he approved the withdrawal. By afternoon, the check was in my hands. It wasn't much compared to what the men demanded, but it was all I had. Every bit of security left in my life. I looked at Michael. This ends tonight. He nodded, his voice barely a whisper. I'll make it right, Mom. I promise. That evening, we went to the address Mr. Reed had left in a text message, an old, abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. The sun was setting behind the trees, painting the sky in streaks of red and gold. My stomach turned as we approached the building. Stay behind me, I told Michael. Inside, the air smelled of dust and oil. Mr. Reed was already waiting, sitting on a crate like a king on his throne. His two men stood nearby. You actually came, he said, almost amused. I wasn't sure you would. I stepped forward, holding out the envelope. Here. It's everything I have. He took it, opened it, and counted the money slowly. Not the full amount, he said after a moment. But close enough. You bought him some mercy. He stood up, tucking the envelope into his coat. You're free to go. Michael looked up, stunned. That's it. Mr. Reed smirked. That's it. I'm a businessman, not a monster. We turned to leave, relief flooding through me like sunlight after a storm. But as we reached the door, Mr. Reed's voice stopped us. Oh, and Michael, he said, his tone colder now. Don't ever come near my circle again. If you do, I won't be so generous next time. Michael nodded quickly. I understand. We left the warehouse and stepped into the fading evening light. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. But deep inside, I knew something had changed forever. That night, back at the cottage, Daniel made tea while Michael sat quietly by the window. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. You're safe now, I told him softly. He nodded slowly. I don't deserve it. I touched his hand. Maybe not. But that's what love is, giving even when it hurts. He looked at me, tears filling his eyes. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right, Mom. I promise. I smiled faintly, even as exhaustion washed over me. Just promise me one thing, I whispered. Never forget who stood by you when everyone else walked away. Michael nodded. I won't, Mom. Ever. I leaned back in my chair, watching the moonlight through the window. For the first time, the silence in the room didn't feel empty, it felt peaceful. But even peace comes with a price. Because the next morning, when I woke up, something unexpected was waiting at my door. Something that would change all our lives again. The morning sun had barely risen when I heard a knock on my door. It was soft at first, polite, almost hesitant, but it carried a weight that made my heart race. After everything that had happened, every unexpected sound made me uneasy. I walked slowly toward the door, my hands trembling slightly. Daniel was still asleep on the couch, and Michael had gone for an early walk to clear his head. When I opened the door, I froze. Standing there was a police officer. His uniform was pressed, his expression calm but serious. Good morning, ma'am, he said, holding out a folded piece of paper. Are you Mrs. Margaret Collins? Yes, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm afraid I have some questions about your son, Michael Collins. For a moment, my heart stopped. Michael? What about him? Did something happen? The officer shook his head. He's fine, ma'am. But we received a report last night. Something about a warehouse, some men, and a large sum of money. We're investigating possible criminal activity, and your son's name came up. I blinked in confusion. He didn't do anything wrong. Those men, they threatened him. I understand, ma'am, the officer said gently. We're just trying to piece everything together. If you could ask him to come to the station this afternoon, we'd appreciate it. He handed me a card and walked away, leaving me standing in the doorway with a heavy heart. When Michael returned home half an hour later, I showed him the card. He paled instantly. They found out, he whispered. Michael, I said softly. What else aren't you telling me? He sank into the chair, his hands shaking. Mom, it wasn't just gambling debt. Mr. Reed wasn't just a moneylender. He was part of something bigger, a network that launders money through fake businesses. I didn't know at first, but when I found out, it was too late. They said if I didn't pay, they'd frame me. My heart twisted painfully. Oh, Michael. He looked up at me, tears in his eyes. When you came to that warehouse, you saved me. But now they'll think we were part of it too. I've dragged you into my mess. I walked over to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. Then we'll face it together. I'm done running, Michael. If we have to tell the truth, we'll tell it, all of it. That afternoon, we went to the police station together. The same officer greeted us kindly and led us into a small room. Michael told them everything, about his debts, the threats, the warehouse meeting, even about the money I'd given to Mr. Reed. When he finished, the officer leaned back in his chair. You did the right thing by coming forward, he said. We've been tracking Mr. Reed for a while. Your information helps us a lot. You may be asked to testify, but you're not in trouble. Relief washed over me like a cool breeze. Michael exhaled deeply for the first time in days. Then the officer added quietly, We'll do our best to recover your money, ma'am. But I can't promise much. I smiled faintly. It's all right, officer. What I got back today is worth more than any money. Weeks passed and slowly, peace began to return. The police arrested Mr. Reed and his men a month later. Michael found a steady job working for a construction company in town. Daniel started helping him with side projects, and for the first time, my two boys worked together without fighting. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the three of us sat outside on the porch, sipping tea. The soft breeze carried the smell of blooming jasmine. And for once, life felt gentle again. Mom, Michael said quietly, I've been saving money. I want to buy you a new house. Not big, but something you can truly call your own. I smiled, shaking my head. You don't have to do that, son. I'm happy right here. He looked at me earnestly. I know, but I want to do it. To show you I've changed. Daniel chuckled softly. Don't argue with him, Mom. Let him try to make things right. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. All right, I said. But only if it's a house with a big kitchen. You both still eat like teenage boys. They laughed with me, and for a moment, everything felt whole again. A few days later, I stood in front of the cottage, watching the sunset. The world looked softer now. The same sky, the same wind, but a different heart inside me. I realized something that day. Sometimes losing everything doesn't mean the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of something better, a new chapter you never planned to write. I thought back to the moment when Michael told me, "It's time you moved out." Those words had broken me once, but now they reminded me how far we'd come. Because sometimes moving out isn't about losing a home. It's about finding your strength. I smiled to myself, whispering into the wind, "We're okay now, Robert." The boys finally found their way. And as the last light of the evening faded, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Moral/life lesson. Never let betrayal or hardship steal your kindness. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the strength that lets you build again when everything else falls apart. Family can hurt you, but sometimes, they can also heal you in ways no one else can. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Hit subscribe and join me for more real, emotional grandma stories that will make you laugh, cry, and learn. Broken heart dizzy. Tell me in the comments. What would you do if your own child told you to move out? Backhand index pointing down.